This is the Late Round Podcast with your host, JJ Zacharyson.
What's up, everyone? It's JJ Zacharyson, the editor-in-chief at FanDuel and at NumberFire.com, and this is episode 557 of the Late Round Podcast, with many shows that are part of the FanDuel Podcast Network. Thanks for tuning in. FanDuel is giving you the opportunity to bet on Week 5 of the NFL season. All you have to do is go to sportsbook.fanduel.com or download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. Place a 3 or more leg same-game parlay wager with cash on any Week 5 NFL game, and if your bet loses, you get a refund and site credit with a max refund of $10. Bet on Week 5 of the NFL season with FanDuel by heading over to FanDuel Sportsbook today and placing a risk-free NFL same-game parlay. Must be 21 years or older and present in Arizona, Colorado, Iowa, Illinois, Indiana, Michigan, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, Virginia, or West Virginia. Refund issued as non-withdrawable site credit that expires in 7 days. Max refund $10. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Same game parlay available for multiple sports in all states on mobile/web. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit fanduel.com/RG in Colorado, Iowa, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Illinois, Virginia. 1-800-9-WITH-IT in Indiana. 1-800-270-7117 for confidential help in Michigan. Tennessee Redline 1-800-889-9789. Visit 1-800-GAMBLER.net in West Virginia or call 1-800-NEXT-STEP or text NEXT STEP to 53342 in Arizona. After 4 weeks of football, Derrick Henry has more targets, 15 of them, than Aaron Jones and Alvin Kamara, who have 14. This was something that I didn't think would happen this year with Derrick Henry, and it's unlocked his true upside. On the season, Henry has a 10% target share, and that's within an offense that's throwing the ball more. Tennessee is averaging 38 pass attempts per game so far this year. Their previous 3-year average, their average under Mike Vrabel, has been 28.5 pass attempts per game. So the Titans are seeing 10 more pass attempts per game, and Derrick Henry is beating his career-high target share by a significant margin. That combination is what's really unleashing Derrick Henry this year. Brandon Ayuk had another bad performance in Week 4. But even though that performance was bad, even though the end result in fantasy wasn't what Ayuk managers wanted, he at least is playing more than what he played in Weeks 1 and 2. In Week 1, his snap share was 47%. In Week 2, 54%. Week 3, that jumped up to 86%. And then this past week, it fell to 67%. So not quite as low as weeks 1 and 2. But it's obviously not a good thing. According to Pro Football Focus's routes run data, we saw a little more separation between Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk in Week 4 versus Week 3. But if you want to look at this from a glass half full perspective, at least Ayuk's peripherals don't look as bad as they did in weeks 1 and 2. Where to go from here, I'm not totally sure. I think Ayuk is talented and should be more involved in this offense. I also highly doubt, though, that he's going to overtake Deebo Samuel and George Kittle in the pecking order, at least this season. So it's hard to foresee some crazy ceiling coming from Ayuk, especially if they eventually make a permanent switch to Trey Lance. We typically don't see multiple pass catchers be fantasy relevant with rookie quarterbacks. So Ayuk's a hold now. Trend 3 is that no team has seen a more significant difference in their neutral script pass rate versus their overall pass rate than the Pittsburgh Steelers. This makes total sense when you think about it. The Steelers are bad, so when they're on offense, they're throwing the ball a lot. They're playing catch-up. On the season, only Detroit and Washington have run more offensive plays while trailing. But when games are closer, the Steelers clearly want to try and establish it. Their neutral script pass rate is still 4th highest in the league, but their overall pass rate is by far the highest in the league. Even if the Steelers want to run the ball more, they kind of can't. Sam Darnold is making me look good, but he's also making me look like an idiot. He's been a streamer pretty consistently on the show this year, and he's come through. But I also mentioned last week how he's not going to maintain his rushing touchdown rate, and he just keeps scoring on the ground. Let's put his 5 rushing touchdowns into perspective. First off, Sam Darnold leads the league in rushing touchdowns. And yes, I still believe that this is not sustainable. But Darnold now has 5 touchdowns on 20 rush attempts. That's a touchdown on every 4 rush attempts. For some perspective, since 2011, quarterbacks have averaged a touchdown on every 24 rush attempts. So Darnold has basically been 6 times as efficient as the average quarterback at scoring touchdowns on the ground this year. Here's the thing though, and I mentioned this on last week's Sleeper Show as well. Regression in rushing touchdowns doesn't mean that Darnold's going to become a lot less viable in fantasy. Like, yeah, a rushing touchdown is worth more than a passing touchdown is. But what if Darnold had rushed for 2 touchdowns and instead of rushing for 3 more, he threw for 3 more? Sam Darnold's touchdown rate is still just 3.4%. That's low. So when we see that regression happen on the ground, things will get better through the air, as long as Carolina's offense remains the same. So don't automatically assume regression is a death sentence for Sam Darnold's fantasy season. It's been a tough time for Allen Robinson this year. His highest single game wide receiver finish has been wide receiver 49. He's seen a 24% target share on the year. That's not bad, but the offense just isn't working for him, and he hasn't found the end zone. The Bears actually only have one passing touchdown this year. Through 4 weeks, Robinson has less than half the fantasy points that he had through 4 weeks last year. It's been that bad. If you want to think positively for Robinson, the way that Chicago scored their touchdowns this season, that will regress. But it's kind of tough to feel optimistic about Robinson's rest of season outlook when Darnell Mooney is out targeting him and outperforming him. You can't start Robinson until we see a strong game from him. Philadelphia running backs have carried the ball a grand total of 13 times over the last 2 weeks. Miles Sanders has the exact same number of total touches as Kenneth Gainwell over this time. But Gainwell's been the primary pass catching option out of that backfield, so Gainwell has seen more valuable touches. This is going to be a problem for Miles Sanders all season long unless one of two things happens. Either Philadelphia just starts utilizing Sanders more as their 2-minute drill or pass catching back, or Philadelphia just needs to start playing better. They need to not be in negative game scripts like we saw against Dallas and like we saw against Kansas City. Now let's assume the first thing doesn't happen. I mean, Kenneth Gainwell's good, so I don't think it's so egregious that he's on the field a lot. If you've got Sanders, you need Philly to be better as a team, to generate positive game scripts. Well, the Eagles get Carolina this week in Charlotte, and then they're at home to face Tampa Bay. And then they're on the road and they get the Raiders. I expect things to get a little bit better for Sanders just naturally, but I don't think that he's going to be some locked-in RB2, some must-start player. A.J. Dillon was more involved in the Packers' offense in Week 4. He ended up seeing half the team's running back rushes, tying Aaron Jones with 15 rush attempts. His previous season high in running back rush share was about 29%. There was a nice positive game script for Green Bay against Pittsburgh. Kind of more than any other game that they've played this year. They had a 10-point lead with over 9 minutes left in the third quarter. And I think this is telling for us moving forward that if we need a flex play at running back, and if Green Bay looks like a big favorite, Dillon could work. Trend 8 this week is that Tom Brady has 1 passing touchdown over his last 2 games after having 9 across his first 2. I want to call this out not to say, I told you regression was coming. Instead, I want to say that this isn't really regression. It's regression and it's an overcorrection. Regression tells us that a number is going to get back to a mean or an average. Let's say we projected Tom Brady to throw 2.5 touchdowns per game from week 3 through the end of the season. That doesn't mean that we would expect Brady to throw 1 touchdown in 2 games to get his season-long average down to 2.5 touchdowns per game. It means the 9 touchdowns that he's thrown, the 9 touchdowns he had in weeks 1 and 2, that's done. He's accomplished that. Moving forward, we should expect a more average performance within the context of Tom Brady. Or to put that another way, 2.5 passing touchdowns per game. Did regression happen? Yes, it happened. It was bound to happen for all the reasons that I talked about on this show. But to this degree, no, that's not just regression. That's an overcorrection. That's something to always keep in mind when we're looking at these numbers. Amari Cooper's averaged a target share per game of 19% this year. That's a couple percentage points lower than last year's average. His overall target share is over 21% because that week 1 game against Tampa Bay, that's helping his overall numbers. But over the last 3 weeks, Cooper's seen shares of 18.5%, 16%, and then 13.6%. Things are trending downward. I'm not panicking here though. The Cowboys offense is good, they should score points, and Cooper's been banged up here and there already this season. If you want to be a little uncomfortable with Cooper because of those injuries, I think that's more valid than feeling worried about his play. Michael Gallup coming back shouldn't really help things, but good players see volume, and Cooper is great. Let's talk about something kind of crazy with the last trend this week. Since 2011, wide receivers have scored a touchdown for every 164.6 receiving yards. So for every 165 receiving yards a wide receiver accumulates, he generally will have 1 touchdown to go along with it. Jakobi Meyers has 1,334 career receiving yards. and he hasn't scored a touchdown yet. Based on his yardage total across his career, a random wide receiver would have been expected to score 8 touchdowns. Meyers has 0. And I know a lot of that has to do with how he's being used and where he's seeing targets and all of that. Trust me, I get it. But he does have 12 red zone targets throughout his career. And to not break a big play, to not find the end zone from further out, I mean, it's all just kind of wild. I'm going to call it right now on this show. Jakobi Meyers gets his first career touchdown this weekend against the Texans. That's going to do it for today's show, though. Thanks to all of you for listening. If you've yet subscribed to the Late Round Podcast, make sure you are by searching for it pretty much anywhere podcasts can be found. And don't forget to follow me on Twitter @LateRoundQB. Thanks for listening, everyone. Talk to you tomorrow.